you want to be successful? Do you want to grow your business? Do you want to dominate the day? Then you're going to need big skip energy.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. I am very glad to have you here. I am so glad that we could connect on LinkedIn. And guys, just so you know, this is a prime example of LinkedIn connections do matter, because I found out about Kristie through another friend of mine, Jeff Bajork, who listeners to my show know has been on a couple of times, and great dude. And I'm very glad that I got some exposure to you, because it's been great finding out about you and your work, reading your book, the whole nine yards. So
Thank you.
go ahead, and for my listeners that may not know about you, know who you are, what you're all about, go ahead and introduce yourself if you would, please.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kristie Jones. I'm out of St. Louis, Missouri. For the last 8 years, I've owned my own sales consultancy business, exclusively working with early stage B2B SaaS startup companies. So I say 0 to 5 million in revenue. I do a lot of helping founders who've been doing founder led selling transition out of that sales job that they never really wanted, and helping them put all the sales processes together and the CRM system so that we can hire them their first real sales professional, as I say, so we can get them out of the sales business. So I spend a majority of my time doing sales processes, build out and improvement, and then the hiring help. So a lot of my tech founders are not comfortable trying to separate the posers from the players, as I call it.
Yeah.
Sales professionals are professional interviewees. They sell themselves every day. So buyer beware. So I
Yep.
help them figure out who the right first fit is for the organization. So I spend majority of my time doing those two things.
Very good. So you got into this about 8 years ago. Now, you obviously have a tech past, which is why, you decided to focus on this, I'm sure. But what made you decide to focus on the startup side, or the early on entrepreneur, as opposed to, say, helping somebody who's seasoned and wants to take it to the next level, which I'm sure you do some of that too. But why is the focus on the early, the early part of it?
Yeah, I think a couple of reasons. One, they need help. So it's like,
Sure.
so there's like, yeah, so they definitely are in the like raise their hand, help me over here category. And they're super grateful because a lot of them, like I said, are tech founders and don't really understand the sales and marketing side of the game. But in order for the thing that they built to be successful and for them to generate revenue and possibly return the money to the VC that they have borrowed it from, you know,
So it's
they're
good.
are going to need revenue.
Yeah.
I think the second reason is I had out of college had fallen into the Fortune 500 world. My first 8 years out of college, I was in retail. So I was a buyer for a major department store.
Mhm.
And honestly, like I didn't like it. I had come from an entrepreneurial family where my parents had owned a Coldwell Banker franchise. And
Mhm.
so I think I've always sort of had a special place in my heart for the little guy who, mortgages their house, puts their house up as collateral and, sometimes takes payroll and sometimes doesn't take, a paycheck so they can make payroll. My dad often was not being paid so that he can make payroll. And so I think I've always had a kind of a special place in my heart. Like that's a special kind of risk that not everybody
Mhm.
is willing to take enough for my parents and our family. And that's not always the case. But I think I saw firsthand that there's a lot of money to be made in sales if you do it right and you have the right support system. And one of the things that my dad did for the majority of time that he owned that company is he had a business coach, a guy that
Mhm.
was specifically helped those in the real estate industry, owners and brokers.
Sure.
And so, like, I think all of those things sort of even subconsciously played into the fact that I, fell into to the situation of helping small businesses get started, help the founder, making sure that they didn't fail and they could, at some point take payroll, take a paycheck.
Yeah, yeah, that would be helpful every now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. So I always like to ask people that started off in corporate America and transitioned over into self-employment. I always ask them the same question. What was the tipping point for you that said, you know what, this is just not for me. I've got to go out on my own because of X, Y, and Z. What was it, in your life that happened that said, you know what, I am better served doing something else,
I was
or I can
asked.
better serve others, I should say.
Yeah, it was not quite that altruistic. I appreciate you like trying to help me out here, but that was actually not exactly how it went down. Um, you're a good guy. I was asked to compromise my values and integrity in a way
Hmm.
that I was unwilling to do, and then in a way that I thought might put me on a witness stand at some point.
Okay.
So when that happened, I was gone within 90 days of that.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
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 you
and at
said,
that point, yeah, at that point I was like, yeah, if this is what that's about, I'm not about that.
nope.
So yeah.
Yeah,
let's
so at that
get
point you
out of
said, "You
that."
know what? Enough of this. I'm gonna be my own boss. I'm gonna drive this. I'm gonna help others,
Well, actually,
get it done."
I did not start my own business out of that. So I left corporate America, and the first thing I did was I spent 10 years working for a small company. I
Right.
was under $1 million when, when I started there, and was about 10 million when I left. But I knew I knew I wanted a seat at the Knights of the Round Table, as I called it.
Mhm.
And I knew I didn't wanna be in the same position that I've been in corporate America, and in fairness, like, it was a lot of red tape, right? There were a lot of layers between me and the top of the ivory
Mhm.
tower, and I didn't feel like I didn't feel like I was a number. Like, I did feel like, as a buyer, I felt like I had some importance. People were looking at my numbers, my department mattered. But
Mhm.
in general, it just, I just didn't feel committed to the cause, I guess.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. So, yeah, I think that part is something that a lot of people share. When they decide to kind of break up with corporate America and do something different. So,
Yeah.
what is it about sales exactly that you find so attractive? What is it that of all the different things that you could do or could have focused on? Even before you started this venture 8 years ago. During your time as a consultant, that kind of thing. What is it about sales that gives you the warm and fuzzies?
My favorite sales job to today is still the one I had in high school and college, and it was waiting tables.
Yeah.
And that's where I really figured out that I can own my own income. Like, I
Hmm.
can be completely reliant. I think I made, I don't know, $1.70, $2.01 or something as my
Right.
hourly wage for showing up and working in the smoking section, because that's how old I am. But really, like, how much I brought home every night. Like, I had a habit of, like, putting all my money in my apron. And then I would, take my apron off when my shift was over, and I would go home, and the first thing I would do is dump it all on the family room carpet
Hmm.
and count it all up, right? And then I had, like, a special envelope for it, and I took it to the bank X number, every X number of days. But, like, I was competing with myself every day.
Right.
But I really did feel like, depending on how well I knew my product, what was 86th in the kitchen, which items had nuts, how well was I engaging with the customers. But that's a really hard job. And I say it's funny how many sales professionals tell me that they started out in the restaurant business, or
Mhm.
in some form of hospitality,
I'm gonna
because
say any kind of hospitality is gonna be tough.
yeah, you don't get to pick your customers. Like,
Right.
they just get seated in your section, and you show up and you don't know if they've just been in a fight in the car on the way in, whether or not they're there to celebrate something that's not a happy anniversary. Like, you don't even
Yeah.
know what you're walking into. And so you have to read people fast. You have to, to read the room. You have to figure out, is this, like, we're going to use, is humor going to be okay here? Or you're going to get the heck beat out of you if you try to make a joke? Like, got to read people really quickly. But,
Mhm.
I say that waiting tables was fast paced and personality packed, and it was just perfect for me.
Yeah.
As an extrovert, like, that was the perfect job for me, and I really enjoyed the variety. I think that was the other thing
Mhm.
that, that caused me potentially to leave corporate America, was that,
Mhm.
that I like, I have 3 to 5 clients at any given time. I don't normally work with anybody longer than 6 months, and so that fits really nicely with my ADD, and, like,
A
so did
sales
waiting.
professional with ADD? I've never heard of
Oh,
such.
I know. So, but waiting tables was perfect for me for that reason. Tables
Yeah.
turned over, like, in a shift, you could have 3 different people sitting at that
Oh, it's
table.
always something new, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So it's just, and plus that, like, I like to be challenged, like, mentally. So I like that stay on your feet kind of thing.
Mhm. Very cool. So that gives me and the listeners a little bit of background as to who you are. You know what? I wanted you to come on because I wanted you to talk about something that you just had come out here recently, and that is for my YouTube people. You can see this, sell your way in.
There
And
we
I
go.
just got this, like I told you, it is very good. I really like the concept and the content so far. Before we dive into some of the highlights, what was your inspiration for doing this?
I really did think, as I had a 20-year career as a sales leader, 16 before I started my own company, but I did some fractional sales leadership out of the box.
Hmm.
And I call it my mommy speech. Like, I would see people that I just thought were in the wrong role, right?
Yeah.
They were in the wrong role. They were selling the wrong thing in the wrong industry, you know, the wrong, amount of sales, like, enterprise versus mid market versus SMB. And I just knew that if people could find, but people say I'm in sales or I want to be in sales, and it's this big,
Hmm.
broad category, but people don't understand, I don't think, all their options. Like, I
Hmm.
consider the implementation specialist or the onboarding specialist in sales, customer success, account management, sales, sales engineer, solution consultant, sales. Like, there are so many sales roles, and some of which are not, like, everybody just thinks about hunter. as the,
Right.
as the sales role. But there are so many sales roles where you can make variable income, variable meaning commission or bonuses,
Mhm.
where you really can control that side of the coin.
Yeah.
That I wanted to, like, if you really wanted to get to the top 10%, I think there are a lot of people out there that are struggling to figure out, I'm saying what Susan's saying, and I'm listening to Susan's calls, and I'm saying what Susan's saying, but I'm not getting the results that Susan's getting, and you don't understand why.
Mhm.
Like, I wanted to help people who are either thinking about going into sales or are struggling to get to the top 10% to say, like, "Hey, like, maybe the reason is you've picked the wrong sales role, working for the wrong sales leader in the wrong company in the wrong industry, selling the wrong thing."
Yeah.
And also, maybe you're not doing some of the things that top 10 percenters are doing that they don't always talk about.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. But I want to ask you about something else that you just mentioned, and of course, this is in the book about find the right sales role in the right industry. I find a lot of times that there's one school of thought that says, "Hey, if you have the right sales fundamentals, you can essentially be a plug and play into any industry and sales role to a degree." I
Mhm.
think there's some truth to that,
I
but
do too.
yeah, but at the same time, there's also once you get past that point of the industry, the product, the whole thing matters. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
With this is cliche, right? But you do have to love what you sell, right?
Sure.
If you can't
You
get
gotta believe in
passionate
it.
Yeah, if you can't get passionate about it, and if you don't believe you're helping, right? If
Mhm.
you believe you're selling and not helping, I think that's also a barrier to success. But you have to really enjoy what you're selling. You have to be in an industry where not only do you believe in the product, but you want to help in that way, right? You
Yeah.
really truly believe this is gonna be a helpful situation. And I think there's some non-crossovers, to be honest with
Mhm.
you. So I
Mhm.
don't normally hire people who've been selling a widget to sell SaaS or services,
Yeah.
right? If you've been selling John Deere tractors or copper piping, I don't know that's transferable. I
Right.
do
Well, that's
sort of
that's more transactional versus relational sales, and there's nothing wrong with either one.
Right. Yes, but I don't do the crossover thing. In fact, I don't really even work with anybody who sells a product in that manner. But
Mhm.
I do believe to some extent that if you have good sales fundamentals, meaning you understand your sales superpower and your secret weapons, you understand how to go into any company and take their sales process and customize it and tailor it to your strengths so you can
Mhm.
play to your, to the things that make you different or better than everybody else.
Yep.
So I do think that, I do believe to some extent you can, like, if you have good, solid sales fundamentals. The problem is that when I ask the following question, which I asked to a candidate this morning who was on their third job since college, and I said, "What professional sales training have you been provided
Mhm.
by your previous companies, current or previous companies?" And he said, "I haven't."
Mhm.
And I'm like, and I hear that over and over. So that means you can't step into just any role, right? And
Correct.
go and take and bring your personalized, customized sales process that works for you
Mhm.
into somebody else because you haven't developed a personalized, customized sales process that
That's
works
right.
for you. So, you have to, and that's the other thing. Like, I don't think people should be taking jobs with companies that aren't providing professional sales training and
Mhm.
soft skills training. Like, people think product training or
Product
industry
training,
training,
yeah,
it's
that's
not
nuts
sales,
and
right?
bolts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so, like, I also think that people don't know the questions to ask. Like, I believe because I spend half my time helping companies hire sales professionals, I believe it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
I'm gonna first make sure that I think you're qualified, in fairness, but then I'm gonna flip the script and make sure that you're an educated consumer. So, I'm gonna give you access to other sales professionals in the organization and let you have private conversations with them. I'm
Mhm.
gonna make sure you fully understand our sales process because if it doesn't work for your, strengths, superpowers, secret weapons, then why would you take a job with us?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think it's gotta be a good fit above all else. And I like what you just said about the product knowledge. I think a lot of times salespeople get so fixated on learning everything they can about this, that, and the other. And I think that which is don't get me wrong, obviously it's important. You have to be able to speak knowledgeably about what you sell, duh. But at the same time, I think that tends to generate a lot of show up and throw up kind of mentality where you tell everyone this is my new bright shiny object that does A, B, C, D, E, and F, and what's most important to them may be on down the alphabet. You don't even know, right? And so I think that tends. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. You've got to be able to ask the right questions, and because, like, not every time is your shiny object the right one. The fact of the matter is, in SaaS sales, we have under a 20% close rate.
Yeah.
So that means, like, on a good day, 1 in 5 out of your
Hmm.
pipeline are going to buy, which means the majority of them are not for whatever reason, which is normally apathy, right? Normally they do nothing. You don't really
Yeah.
lose them to competitor or price. You lose them to apathy. They don't do anything. So yeah, so you have to understand that.
Yeah, for sure. It's actually funny you say that too, because James Meir, are
Uh-huh.
you familiar with him? Yeah.
I know James.
You
Uh-huh.
know, yeah, in his new book, Done Sticking Deals, he says, you know what, that is the number one killer is apathy.
It is.
Yeah, and keeping them engaged is hard to do, especially in longer term sales cycles. So, all right. So in your book, I want to talk about, and I think I want to say you may actually, this may be the very first part. Let me look real quick.
Okay. Tell me.
Yes, yeah, yeah. You got to meet yourself before you meet the prospect.
Yep.
I love that. That sentence. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think again, lack of self-awareness is never a great
Yeah.
thing. So the more you know yourself, the more you can again play to your strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think a lot of people, I do a workshop called Identifying and Leveraging Your Sales Superpower.
Mm-hmm.
And I walk into a room of sales professionals, right, to do this workshop, and I get a lot of blank stares, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I use the analogy that, hey, Batman didn't actually have any
No
superpowers.
superpowers. Yeah.
He didn't. He had no superpowers,
Unless you
right?
consider extreme wealth a superpower.
Well, yes, Alfred did make sure that he had the best of everything,
That's right.
but he really like he didn't have X-ray vision, he couldn't
Mhm,
fly, he didn't have super strength, he wasn't the Hulk. And what he basically did is he identified his strengths and then he doubled down on those, right? He
mhm.
trained harder than everybody else. He was smart, so he doubled down on that. He thought he could outsmart the bad guys. But like that's what everybody should be thinking. Like I was probably not born with a natural sales gift. Like just because you're an extrovert doesn't mean you should be in sales,
Right, the same as
right?
being an introvert doesn't mean you're gonna be terrible at
And
sales.
that's right. And I've had plenty of great introverts who were top sales professionals.
Yep.
But if you take the Batman example, like it's possible for you to outrun, outsmart, all of those things, but he had to identify his strengths first and he had a
Mhm.
passion, right? And going back to that passion part, like his parents had been killed by bad guys when he was a small child.
Right.
And his why, his personal why was I don't want this to ever happen to anyone else in
Mhm.
Gotham City. And that's the other thing that I talk to a lot of sales professionals about. I'm like, what's your personal why? Right? But not everybody knows what their personal why is. And, as an example, one of my personal whys when I got into sales leadership was my parents, because of the real estate business, had been good around the time I went to college.
Mhm.
My brother and I both left college debt free.
Okay.
And so one of my personal whys was I wanted to give that to my son.
Mhm.
I wanted my son to be able to, come out of college debt free.
Yep.
And in order to do that, there were only so many jobs. Like if I had stayed in the retail job, I may or may not have been able to do that,
Mhm.
right? But with sales, like, I had a personal why. Like I was working extra hard during that period of time as he was in high school and getting close to college to make sure that I had put, squirreled enough money away in order to do
Right.
that. So
Yep.
I think people like when I run this workshop, sometimes just people just kind of look at me funny. And I said, if you don't know what your superpowers are, ask those around you, they do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. People around you know exactly. I go, when someone comes and asks you advice, like, what are people asking you advice about? What are they coming to you for support or, information about? Like, if you're not sure, just ask 10 people. They'll tell you. They know.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's getting to somebody's why is not an easy task, and so I can definitely see how a full workshop could easily be dedicated to that. But it's funny, like a lot of people will say, especially in sales, they'll say, "Well, why are you doing this?" Well, the money's better than anything else. Okay, well, yeah, that may be true, but you can't stop there. Let's keep digging. Why is that important to you? What does that provide you? What does that what does that give you by providing you with these things?
Yeah.
So I think you have to keep digging until you really get to the heart of the matter. It's kind of, but it's kind of ironic because you're doing the same thing with your prospects, right? You're trying to feel out what's really important with them. So
But yeah, it's so funny. We do this day in and day out. And this is one of the things that just baffles me. But we do day in and day out, we're, reaching, if we're doing it right, we
mhm,
understand our ICP forward and backward and the personas within those companies. And we're only reaching out to those people,
right,
proactively reaching out to them. But then we take a reactive approach with our career,
yeah.
right? I said if people were treating their career like they treated outbound prospecting, then I would never have to post a job because people would be reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, like I've got these sales superpowers
Right,
and this company looks like they could use my sales superpowers. And so you should probably call me and we should probably talk."
yeah,
Right? But people are not proactive about their career and I think one of the reasons is they don't, I said like, you take a job because a recruiter called you. Or this is my other second favorite one. How did you get to that company? Oh, a buddy of mine left. He went there And he was like, "Oh man, you are going to love it here. You should come here."
Why the hell did you leave then?
Right. But I'm like, but what if he is in the right, what if that's the right sales role for him,
That's right.
but not the right sales role for you?
Yep.
Just
Yep.
because he loves it, that may be playing to his sales superpowers and his strengths.
Yeah.
But what if it doesn't play to yours? Just because like we're making career decisions, which I believe could be leaving, millions of dollars, up to $2 million, I say,
Yep.
on the table by not being in the right sales role early enough to take that next, I call them, skip levels. Like,
Yep.
skip, what's the next skip level? What's the next skip level? Taking the
That's
right
a
job
good
at
fit
the
for this show, by the way.
Oh, it is a good one, yes.
Yeah, look at
Yes, that's what I call
there.
them. That's what I call
Yeah.
them, skip levels. That's exactly what I call them. But if you're a top 10 percenter, you get to pick that. You really do get to
Mhm.
pick that next job, right? You get to
Yeah.
decide, I'm gonna be leaving. This is the next, like, what that next, like, this is the right next step for challenging. It's a higher
Mhm.
ACV, better close rate. It's a whatever. So, but we still are taking such a reactive position with our career. It's just baffling.
For sure. So I want to ask you about one more early part in that book. Okay. So picking the right seat on the bus, which, I'm sure you've read it. I've read the energy bus, that's a great metaphor. Yeah. It's, great book. So why'd you pick that out to have in there so early on? Is it again, going back to that more formative, you got to be sure the right fit is there, that kind of thing?
Just because there are lots of companies I walked into as a sales leader before I was a consultant, when
Hmm.
met my new team that I did not hire, I would be like,
Right.
"Hey, like, it seems like you would be a better fit for X." Like, I tell a story in the book of a guy named Brent who worked at the company I was working for, and he was a project manager on the dev team. So he was kind of the liaison between the customers and the development team. And, like, again, this was your typical startup, right? Ping pong table, beer in the fridge, you know how it is. And so, like, late in the evening, like, we'd grab a beer, we'd head to the ping pong table or whatnot. And after doing this for a while, I said to him, I'm like, "Hey, you're in the wrong seat on the bus." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Dude, you need to be in sales. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, no, I could never. I don't ever wanna. No way, Jose." And I'm like, "You could be making so much more money." Like, he was a younger guy, right? New,
Hmm.
young family, married, new house, fresh house, first house. And I was like, "You're crazy. Like, this is totally like you're wired for this. You have traits
Mm.
that are the right traits for this." And he poo-pooed me. And I chased him for a little bit of time. And then one day
Yeah.
he shows up in my office and says, "I want to talk to you." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "The company's approached me about being a solution consultant." And I go,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's genius. This is like the good compromise. Like, you don't want to, start your month at zero every day, every month, and you don't want to do a 50-50 split base and variable, but it's under the sales umbrella. You have
Hmm.
all of the right traits for this job. There's a
Right.
variable component to it. You should totally do that."
Hmm.
And that was in 2015, maybe. And now he is the SVP of solution consultants at that organization. And he
Yeah.
just wasn't in the right seat on the bus yet. And maybe the seat I was trying to talk him into wasn't the exact right seat for him either. But
Yeah.
somebody in the organization knew that he was in the wrong seat on the bus.
Yeah.
And then once he did, like, the success just came.
Yeah, how often do people really sit there and say, if they're sitting there, they're not fulfilled, they're not feeling right fit, they automatically think it's, well, I just need to change companies, right? Well, not necessarily, right?
Right.
You may say, oh, well, I like the people I work with, the company's always, well, maybe you're just not in the right role.
That's
Hell,
right.
it could be the reversal. Maybe you're in a sales role when you should really be more in an ops role.
Yeah.
But both equally important, right? So
Yes.
yeah, I think there's a lot to that. A lot to that. So, Christy, I'm gonna ask you a question that's unrelated to this book because we are running a little short on time. I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna kind of put you on the spot. All things being equal, if you were somebody who was looking to get into sales for the first time, what would you say the most important trait of a new successful salesperson is?
Adaptability and flexibility.
Okay,
Yeah.
can you expound on that for me?
I can.
I figured you might.
This is an ever-changing world, right? Even if you go and work for one of the Fortune 500 companies, like, now we know in ways we never knew before 2020, that
Mhm.
like not everything is guaranteed and not everything's going to be on a straight path.
Yeah.
And I think people who are not set in their ways, so to speak, people who have enough flexibility, you need to have structure, right? Like everybody needs to have
Mhm.
structure, but that's different than adaptability. Like you need to be able to maybe not necessarily pivot because pivot's a big change, but iterate,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
I prefer to use the word iterate. Like, what's working today? What if what's working today and making you successful today doesn't work in Q1?
Yeah. Yeah,
Like, what are you
exactly.
going to do? Like, what are you going to do? Like,
Or hey, let's take it more elemental. Month to month, sometimes you have to do different strategies depending on what your pipeline looks like and who you've been going after, right?
yep. So you have to have a
So,
willingness to make a change
mhm.
or, test drive some things that maybe you have not test driven in the past or you've been uncomfortable or you tried it in the past and it didn't work, but that doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
not going to work today. So I think right now the people who, and again, I'm a little bit biased because I live in the startup world where adaptability is a requirement, not a nice to
Mhm.
have.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
we're changing messaging and pricing on a day-to-day basis, it feels like sometimes. But I do think that those people who have the ability to adapt and
Mhm.
change when change is necessary and are not resistant to change are gonna
Yep.
put themselves in a much better position.
I agree with that completely. In fact, that's why so I do a workshop on adaptability. It's
Mm,
probably the most requested one, and
interesting.
there's a good reason why. So,
Good, A answer. I'm so competitive.
yes, look at you. All right. So, guys, selling your way in. I'm going to finish it up. I'm going to leave a full review out there. I'm sure the second half's going to be as good as the first half. So, but for anybody out there, Kristie, that needs to, learn more about you, what you do, how they can get in touch with you, where they can get the book, etc.
Yep. Yep.
Go ahead. This is shameless plug time.
I love it. All right. So first and foremost, really easy. KristieKJones.com. So Christie, the way it's going to be spelled with the letter K in the middle, Jones.com. And from there, you can get the book, or you can go to sellingyourwayin.com. And
Hmm.
then what I'd rather you do instead of all of that is I'd rather you just connect with me on LinkedIn and, send me a little message and tell me what your one takeaway nugget was from the podcast. So
Yep.
I know what resonates with people and then we can be friends that way.
I love it. I love it. Well, Christy, thank you so much for coming on the show. Looking forward to it. And I got a feeling that I'm going to have you on again. So thank you
Thank
again for
you.
coming on.
It was great. Bye-bye.